The following program is for informational purposes only and is not a recommendation to buy or sell Bitcoin or any particular investment or product, nor a recommendation to pursue any particular purchase or investment strategy. The brands, opinions, advertisements, and recommendations expressed by this program are the opinions and recommendations of the individuals creating the show and not the LTB network.
Welcome to Bitcoins and Gravy, Episode 2.
So today on Coinbase, Bitcoins are hovering at $807.
Now that's gravy. Welcome to Bitcoins and Gravy, and thanks for joining us today as we podcast from East Nashville, Tennessee. I'm John Barrett.
And I'm Lyd Shaw.
We're two Bitcoin enthusiasts who love to talk about Bitcoins.
And share what we learn with you, the listener. Welcome to the show, and thanks for listening.
On today's show, we interviewed Jimmy Song, one of the developers of Colored Coins.
We also attend the second Nashville Bitcoin meetup to hear more about internet security,
Bitcoin tourism,
and finally, how to prove we exist.
We also take you on a field trip to Flight,
the first restaurant in Nashville to accept Bitcoins.
And, according to our host, Scott Sears, the first fine dining establishment in the country to accept Bitcoins.
And now we take you to the second Nashville Bitcoin meetup, where I had the pleasure of talking with Bill Butler of MusicCityBitcoins.com.
So it's Bill Butler?
Bill Butler, yes.
You were telling me about Invictus.
Invictus,
I don't know anything about that.
Okay, so these guys have the idea that everything, we've all felt that things are going to the edges, right? The internet took newspapers and publishing, and it pushed it to the edges. It took communications with central switches, and it pushed it to the edges. It pushed getting music, getting video. Everything you get is all to the edges. And so there's central distribution on a lot of that, but when you start getting into something like BitTorrent, that even took the distribution to the edges. Like, there's no central server with BitTorrent that stores all the files that you download. It's all on a series of peers, and those peers collaborate to give you the final thing. And so Bitcoin has taken financial system to the edges. So essentially everybody shares in the public ledger. So Invictus has said, well, that's all really cool. How about this? What if we take security to the edges? Right now, when you go to a website and you see that little lock on the website, it's because you've got a third party that says that that's verified and this secure connection that you're seeing is truly secure, and there's no third party that could be snooping on you. Well, Invictus says, oh, let's use the blockchain to provide that security, and let's let the peer-to-peer network be the third party. So the implications for this are kind of mind-boggling. So Invictus has started this. They wanted to do a really quick blockchain, and they ended up calling it ProtoShares, and they're going to mine it for a very short period of time. It came out in November, and they made sure that everybody had access to it. They didn't pre-mine anything. Pre-mining is considered bad. So PROTO, shares. And they called it shares to give you this idea that it's essentially like stock. So if you have either mined or purchased ProtoShares, Invictus's, I don't want to say their promise, but their roadmap is that these ProtoShares will magically become BitShares. BitShares are essentially going to be the foundation for virtual companies that will roll out. So if you decide you have a business, and one example for a business, and they're calling them DACs, Distributed Autonomous Corporations. Big words, but essentially the idea is that it's actually it's a company that can survive on its own without any people. It still does need people. It needs guidance. But the understanding is that much like the open source movement, the company can be built in an open source manner. So if I'm in one country and someone else is in another country and someone else is in another country, we can all sort of be voted in or elected on the blockchain, through votes in the blockchain, and we can share responsibilities. And if we need something done, we can issue a bounty for that in shares of the company that they would then...
Does this affect in any way the moral compass of a traditional corporation?
I think it relies on the members. One of the things that they bring up when you read through the documentation is that what this makes possible is the idea that if I live in the United States and I have certain things I can do legally, but there are certain aspects of that business that I cannot do legally. It's quite possible that another member of that company who lives in another geographic territory could very well do that legally, perform that task. I don't know if it's always about legality. It may also just be about opportunity or the ability to do it. But they do bring up the point that, and it's going to require a whole new set of interesting international corporate law to deal with it. Even in the tech community, we're kind of trying to wrap our heads around the idea that, wow, you know what? I could be an investor in that company in a startup phase, and I don't have to be accredited. Like, I don't have to have the $1 million net worth necessarily to say, oh, you know what, I'm going to buy a few crypto shares in that company and see how it does. Or better yet, I'm going to own proto shares. And every time a new company comes out, I automatically get 10% of the value of my proto shares. Essentially, this becomes seed capital for every company that comes out. These proto shares do. And since there's only ever going to be 2 million of them, the idea is that they could potentially be valuable, not in the same way Bitcoin is valuable, but they'll be valuable because of the fact that you will end up owning equity in all these DACs that come out. And I'm not talking about 5 DACs. I'm talking about the potential for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of DACs, because it's conceivable in the future that companies won't have a need to go public. They won't have a need to be listed on a market.
They'll already be public.
They'll be public. They'll be global. The minute they start a chain, and the minute they elect the CEO and the CFO and all the pieces that go into that, all that will happen in a publicly verifiable way on the blockchain. Have you heard of the concept of proof of existence? Right. So if you and I have a contract, then we would say we both sign it, and then we hash it, shove it up to the blockchain at some certain point in time. If there's ever a dispute as to whether that contract existed, we don't need a notary. We don't need a notary to pull it out of their file cabinet and tell us it exists. All we have to do is hash that document, look at the hash, go find it on the blockchain, and say, oh, there it is. Yeah, that document existed.
Now, would anybody publicly be able to see that document, or would they need to decipher the hashtag somehow before you could actually see the document?
No, I don't believe they need to see the document. They just need the hash of the document because it's unique. Okay. That hash is a unique representation. For example, a guy took his DNA sequence, he hashed it, and he pushed it up to the blockchain to prove that he existed.
So, Bill, are you guys accepting Bitcoin for your business yet?
I will accept it for any consulting services that I do. I don't have any clients that are interested in paying me in Bitcoin, but really, my purpose right now is to try to convince businesses, charities, anyone who will listen that it makes sense to accept Bitcoin. Because they're going to save, a couple percentage points at a bare minimum over whatever they're using as a current credit card processor. And I love the comment earlier today with the value to PR. It's a huge PR tool right now.
Yeah,
if you're the first business of your kind, to take Bitcoin, then you're going to get attention. You're going to get attention to all these people actually who have money.
Well, so I have a local recording studio, and I think it would be great PR. How do you think that would apply to a local business?
Well, your client's going to spend Bitcoin with you, right? I mean, that's the idea.
They would pay for time with me in the studio through Bitcoin. They were talking in here tonight about the idea of tourism and tourists coming to Nashville to spend Bitcoin, and essentially as a local business I could offer that. It might be the kind of thing where somebody's particularly wealthy and able to come from another country to come make a record here just because I accept Bitcoin.
Well, it also makes transportation of that currency easy, right? Because they don't have to deal with an international bank account or international credit cards or anything like that. Their Bitcoin wallet is as easy to use here as it is in their country. I think there's cheapflights.com or something like that. They can handle your flight reservation.
And they're taking Bitcoin already?
Oh, yeah. I think it's called Cheap Flights. And I think they do everything. So then the next thing we need is a hotel, right? Someone in Nashville who's willing to kind of raise their hand and say, yes, we take Bitcoin. And then it might be nice to have a cab company, or if Lyft or Uber, one of those companies would take Bitcoin, that'd be great. And then as a tourist, you don't really need a gas station, but I think if the gas station took Bitcoin here.
Well, there's already one in Colorado that's accepting Bitcoin, and then there were like 3 that are about to happen in Wisconsin.
Yeah, we definitely need that. And then a restaurant, more than one. We have Flight right now, but maybe a couple coffee shops, that'd be nice.
Yeah, definitely.
And they're already used to using tablets. They're already used to taking Square.
And then when we can finally get all the homeless people selling what's the paper that they sell here?
The contributor. Is that what it's called?
The contributor. Yeah, once you can contribute to the contributor through Bitcoin from your car driving by with a cell phone, then we're in a whole new world.
Well, and that's another one of those charitable applications that's perfect, because if you envision blockchain.info, you can have all those wallets stored in it. So essentially, they could help manage that for everybody. They could essentially have a separate QR code for each and every person. So when they came back in off the street, you have a ledger for everyone and how much they sold, and then they give the cash out if they need to give cash, or let them transact in Bitcoin.
Anyway, thanks, man. That was awesome.
Thank you.
So one of the corrections we'd like to make is that we Googled it, and it is in fact cheapair.com that accepts Bitcoins.
Today on the show, Lidge and I are speaking with Jimmy Song, one of the developers of Colored Coins. Jimmy, welcome. Could you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your background before you got involved in developing Colored Coins?
Thank you, John. First of all, thank you for having me. I started in development about 15 years ago, and I've been doing various things for various different companies, but I really got involved in Bitcoin about 3 years ago. I've been a developer for about the last 6 months, doing various things for Color Coins. I'm one of the core developers for Chroma Wallet, which is one of the implementations of Colored Coin.
Let me ask a question. I'm sure I'm not the only one out there that's wondered this. When you talk about developing a coin and being part of the development team, what does that mean exactly?
Well, that means that I'm contributing code. There's Chroma Wallet client, which acts a lot like a Bitcoin wallet, except it does color coins as well. I'm actually going in there and coding things. There's an open source project in GitHub called Bitcoin X NGCCC, which is a name we've sort of transitioned out of, but it stands for Next Generation Color Coin Client. But basically, that's where I do a lot of the work. It's open source. You can download it right now and play with it if you wanted to. If you want to contribute, that's certainly welcome as well. There's a bunch of issues that we need to get done before we do a beta release.
Yeah, I think if I was to download that and play with it, a lot of us would get in trouble. Can you tell us a little bit about what Colored Coin is, and do they exist with or without Bitcoin?
Sure. Bitcoin, as you know, is basically a ledger, and that ledger is called the blockchain, and it has a complete record of what address has access to however many Bitcoins. What Colored Coin does is it essentially allows you to color certain coins for different applications. For example, if you are a company and you want to issue stock through Colored Coins, you would color certain Bitcoins and say, well, these represent shares of my company. And you can have, say, 10,000 shares of your company, and you can distribute them however you want. And in the end, you won't necessarily care who owns the shares, and you can, give out dividends to those addresses fairly easily. And it's all tracked on the Bitcoin blockchain. And to any other Bitcoin node, it looks like a normal Bitcoin transaction. It's just that it contains special meaning as a result of having been colored.
That leads me to another question I had for you. Is there a limit on creating those colored coins? If you're going to create shares for a company, are the total shares created initially, or are they created in addition later on? And then what does that mean for an existing LLC or corporation or anything that might have shares in a company? Can you transfer an existing company into colored coin shares somehow and create a new element of that, or a new way to distribute that?
Sure. So the first question is, who can issue them? Is there a limit? And can you reissue them later and have like a secondary offering? The answer to both those questions is yes. You can basically color any Bitcoins that you want, and you can do it pretty much on an unlimited basis, which means that you can create 10,000 shares and later on do a secondary offering of another 10,000 shares. And that does create some interesting things in the client, in that the client has to know that there was a secondary offering, so you can accept some of those shares as being the same as the normal shares. But basically, if you get the Chroma Wallet client, there's an alpha release now, and it runs on the Bitcoin testnet. You can issue 10,000 shares of like a test company, for example, and play with it. And we don't yet completely have the mechanism for secondary offerings and things like that, but that's definitely in the code. A lot of it works already. We just have to get the UI right so that you can do those things. But to answer your question, anyone can issue those, new stock or bonds or smart property or what have you that you might want to do with color coins. To answer the other question, which is how would say, a public company that already exists transition over. That has a lot of thorny questions around regulatory environment, anonymous stock ownership, and things like that. As you know, Bitcoin can be held pseudonymously, which is essentially anonymous. And there are lots of laws against that, so you have to be very careful. But that said, there are lots of Bitcoin businesses that trade on MPEX, for example. I think ASIC Miner is one. Satoshi Dice used to be one. But they would essentially issue shares of their stock and have it publicly available, and they can issue dividends and all that. And they wouldn't have to know or care about who actually owns those shares.
Would it also apply to a privately held corporation or company?
Yeah, you can certainly do that. Obviously, you don't want to run afoul of the SEC or whatever regulatory body is in your jurisdiction, but that's certainly possible with the client. It's a matter of setting it up and telling your current shareholders, this is how we're going to reissue your stock. Most companies need to keep a track of who owns what shares and things like that.
So it would be the equivalent of a paper certificate, but just in digital form.
Yes, and it's completely traceable, auditable. It has all the goodness of Bitcoin. It's a distributed ledger, so it's very useful that way.
Okay, Jimmy, I know I'm not the only one who's still trying to wrap his mind around the concept of colored coins. So I have 10,000 shares, let's say, and does that mean that that's 10,000 colored coins are tied to 10,000 Bitcoins or 10,000 Satoshis, 10,000 millibitcoins? What does that mean in terms of Bitcoins?
So you're asking about the color value of a Bitcoin. So you could issue it in such a way that one whole Bitcoin corresponds to one share. You could do that. That would obviously make the share enormously expensive to hold because you're tying up, $800 in Bitcoin value along with the share.
Right.
Normally, you want to do one Satoshi to one share, or there are other sort of coloring schemes in which the Bitcoin value actually has very little correlation to actual stock value, and that's using op return scripts and things like that, which we're currently actively discussing on the Color Coin mailing list. But essentially, the two restrictions that you have to get around is one, in the Bitcoin client, there is a dust limit of 5,430, I believe, where below that, they're not going to process your transaction. That's just not something that any node will do. You have to do some tricky things around there, but essentially the math can all work out. We just have to find a way to transfer the value of the color coin from the inputs to the outputs in a transaction. And there are many schemes to do that. The nice thing is that they're completely modular. If you have one particular scheme to do that, say one Satoshi equals one share, then that'll work for all time, and you don't have to upgrade your client or anything in order to trade those.
I see. So if colored coins takes off, let's say that everybody's using colored coins, and let's say also maybe Proto Shares and Mastercoin, does that mean that the projection that people have for the value of Bitcoin, one day Bitcoin is going to be worth $10,000 each Bitcoin, doesn't it mean, though, from what you're telling me, that if an individual share can be tied to one Satoshi, 1/100 millionth of a Bitcoin, right?
Well, it could be tied. It could also not be tied. So one of the most interesting discussions right now going on in Dev mailing list is that it doesn't necessarily have to be a single Satoshi that corresponds to a share. It could be a single Satoshi can actually represent like 50 or 100 shares, whereas another Satoshi can represent like 10 shares or 5 shares. And it's all dependent on how the inputs will have metadata. There's a new protocol in Bitcoin 0.9 called op return, which allows you to make 80 characters of metadata that you can store into a Bitcoin transaction that's completely prunable. And we can use the 80 bytes in order to sort of encode which colored values transfer to what. And the technical details of that are kind of complicated, but it's something that we're working on. It doesn't necessarily mean there's a one-to-one correspondence.
Is that metadata that you're referring to, is that just code, or could it be something else?
Yeah, it could be anything. And the Bitcoin developers purposely left it kind of wide open and limited it very strictly to 80 characters, so you can't store entire images on the blockchain. The idea is that with those 80 characters, you would, hash something and put it on the blockchain as proof that at that point in time something existed or some code is there that you can refer to later.
Jimmy, when I was watching a video from coloredcoins.org on YouTube recently, they were doing a good job of explaining how you can use colored coins to trade in other things of value like gold, like shares, like you discussed. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that. How could you trade in other things using colored coins? And how would that be applied to the average user or perhaps a small business?
Yeah, sure. So I think shares, it's a pretty easy concept to wrap around because, you already had the stock market and you're familiar with certificates and things like that. I think the more interesting thing from a consumer standpoint is smart property. And the whole concept behind smart property is that if a device already knows what its owner is, you can transfer the ownership from person to person. So, for example, if, say, a car manufacturer were to use smart property, then they would let the car listen only to instructions from a certain private key. And that private key would have the ability to, say, turn on the engine. So the car literally cannot go unless the private key is used to encode some instruction to the car saying, hey, let me drive this thing. When you sell the car, what you can do is transfer the ownership. The car in this instance is internet connected, we're assuming. And, it has access to the blockchain. So when you transfer ownership of your car to another person, you're essentially telling the blockchain, okay, don't listen to this private key anymore. Listen to this other private key whose public key is this. And at that point, the entire ownership of the car transfers to this other person. And you could do interesting things like, lend it to this person for 2 hours with, rental cars or whatever. And you can imagine different use cases with, door locks on your house, or, it would all be encoded on your cell phone. So you can, easily just turn on your car with your cell phone and there wouldn't really be anything more necessary. The technology around this is actually pretty exciting because you can, imagine all sorts of connected devices that have a distributed ledger from which they can, extract information.
And each one of these would essentially require one Satoshi to create?
Yeah, so it would be an indivisible share. So it would be a single share that represents ownership of a car or a boat or a house or something like that. I think there's a video that you mentioned on colorcoins.org, which explains, okay, well, we can have things, color coins represent houses or boats or cars, and this is what it's referring to.
Is it true that a Satoshi is indivisible?
Yes, currently.
That could change?
It would have to be a pretty drastic change in the Bitcoin code base, but I believe it is possible. I don't think they're ever planning on doing it.
So I want to steer back to this part of the question too, that as a small business owner, is there a way that colored coin would somehow be issuable from a small business where you could, almost like issuing out coupons or gift cards?
Sure. One of the use cases you can think of is the equivalent of airline miles. And you can issue color coins that represent rewards points, or the typical small business has buy 10 get 1 free, something like that. But instead of something crude like that, which is completely, I'm sure people defraud these places all the time by punching holes where they're not supposed to or whatever. You would have a completely secure solution where you can issue 100 rewards points every time you buy from them or something like that, and you can redeem 1,000 rewards points for a free smoothie or something.
Maybe then Sky Miles would last forever. They would never go away. Wouldn't that be nice? I was reading online, someone asked this question, or they posed this. They said, in reference to color coins, for example, a government could require that any coins exchanged within its borders have a certain, quote, tax authority approved coloring. Then the use of any uncolored coins in any transaction could be outlawed. Jimmy, what's your take on this? True or false?
Could they do it? Probably. For example, you can color a coin and say that it represents a US dollar, which is one way in which you could have a decentralized exchange. But as far as a government saying you can only trade with our colored coin that would pretty much be saying you can only use US dollars in the US and you can't use anything else. Essentially, a government saying that would be the equivalent of banning Bitcoin.
I see. When it comes to colored coins and master coins, proto shares, do you see those as moving us closer to decentralization, further away from government controls?
That's a great question. I would say it's definitely moving us towards decentralization, largely because it allows a lot more peer-to-peer trading, which we don't really have a lot of today. Right now, if you want Litecoins, you're going to have to go to BTCE or Cryptsy or some other exchange where they have, a lot of other currencies, and it's a very centralized sort of framework. Whereas when you have peer-to-peer trading, all you need is some website where people are putting in asks or whatever, and your money is never at risk. Your Bitcoins or Litecoins or proto shares or what have you, they're never at risk. You still control them, and there's no central place where a thief might target and be able to steal all of the Bitcoins out of, which is a great thing in my opinion, and that's definitely a step all those technologies are taking.
So, Jimmy, how long until we could buy colored coins? Where would we buy them and what exchange?
Yeah, that's a good question, too. Right now, we're still working on the client, and we're not really certain exactly where the market's going to open. I mean, like I said, there's smart property, there's stock issuance, there's you could do bonds, you can have decentralized altcoin exchange, you can have a decentralized exchange period with dollar gateways or whatever. We're not really sure where the big demand is. If I had to guess, the first sort of color coins you're going to be able to buy are going to be the Litecoins or something like that, so you can do peer-to-peer exchanging and not have to store all of your coins at BTCE in order to trade them.
I think that's a little confusing to me anyway, the idea of, okay, I want to buy some colored coins because I'm invested in diversified in altcoins. I want to buy some colored coins and I want to have some. So the guy says, well, just buy some Litecoins. And I know that's not exactly what you just said, but I still, I want to know, and I'm sure listeners want to know, where can we get our colored coins and how long?
Yeah, sure. So we're in active development. I would say early February is probably the beta release. Another month or two after that, we'll have something that everyone can use. At that point, it really depends on the issuers and what people are willing to issue, whether it's stocks or bonds or gateways to all currencies or what have you. It's kind of hard to tell right now exactly what color coins you'll be able to buy. We don't exactly have people that already have them because the client isn't out yet. So at that point, we'll have we'll see where the technology goes and what their needs are, and then go from there.
And did we answer the question of how you create a colored coin?
Sure. It's any client can essentially issue however many that they want. So if you were to download the client and say, there's a story on Hacker News from a while back, a guy who sold shares of his life. He issued 10,000 shares to his friends and he kept a bunch of them, but by distributing them, he would, pose questions, and it would be like, should I try some interesting sleep cycle? And they would all vote based on the number of shares they had, and he would basically let them make decisions for him. That's something that you could potentially do with Colorcoin is you, Liz, could issue 10,000 shares of yourself and say, okay, each share represents 1/10,000th of my income or something, and have it go from there.
So is it fair to say that those people who already own Bitcoin, Litecoin, some of the other coins, have an advantage when it comes to colored coins?
They would certainly be more open to downloading the client and playing with it. I'm not sure if they have an inherent advantage per se, other than that they have capital to be able to trade in these fairly easily. And certainly that's something that liquidity is fairly important. So in that way, yes, they would have an advantage.
I'm afraid to say I don't think I would wish 1/10,000th of my income on anybody at this point. Although we did just get the Editor's Choice Award with Let's Talk Bitcoin. So we got a little bit.
we got some
Hey, if price it low enough, who knows? Maybe it's worth it. I don't know.
That's right.
Well, John, do you have any closing questions for Jimmy?
How about any predictions? Do you have any predictions at all when it comes to digital currencies for the future for the next, let's say, 2 or 3 years?
That's the $1 million question, isn't it? There's certainly a lot of speculation going on. I really do believe, though, that the network will prove to be the greatest asset for Bitcoin. There's a trend, I think, if you look over the life of Bitcoin and the price versus difficulty, it's always within an order of magnitude. And the reason I think for that is that the largeness of the network contributes to its security. And that is really what makes Bitcoin what it is. And that's what gives it value, is this very, very strong network. The NSA could not break it right now because it is such a strong network.
Do you think they would if they could?
I don't know. It's a good question. You'd have to ask them. I'm not really in on the inner workings of them. But.
I think we have them on the phone next, don't we?
The network is the strong thing, and as far as I can tell, the network is getting very strong. There's a lot of ASIC manufacturers that are, offering devices that can do 2 terahash per second. So that's a ridiculous amount of hashing power on the network. So if I had to make a prediction, I'm going to predict that as the network grows, so will the Bitcoin price.
Good news. Thank you very much, Jimmy Song, for joining us on Bitcoins and Gravy. It's been a real pleasure to talk with you today. Where can we find more information about you, Jimmy, and Colored Coins?
Well, there's the Colored Coins website is certainly some information there. I think I mentioned earlier the GitHub repository. It is github.com/bitcoinx/ngccc-base. It's kind of a mouthful, but that would be where all the open source development is going on. I'm a contributor there, as is Alex. He's Killer Storm. He's been in the community for a long time. He's the lead developer. There's several other people that are contributing, but that's where you would find a lot of the information. There's also a Bitcoin X mailing list. A lot of the, Bitcoin color coin discussions are there, and that is on Google Groups, and the group name is Bitcoin X.
Excellent. And the Colored Coins website is coloredcoins.org. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's one of them. The actual Chroma Wallet website, I think, is chromawallet.com or org. One of the two. So
great. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Thank you.
So I've just arrived here at Flight Restaurant, where they specialize in serving fine wines here in Nashville. Looking for John. He's here with Connie. Somewhere having dinner, and we're going to go say hi to him and see how it's going. This is one of the first restaurants in Nashville to accept Bitcoins, as far as I understand. Hello.
Hello.
How's your dinner going this evening?
Good, man, Mr. Shaw. Let me bring you some water. Would you like a drink as well?
What's your name?
My name's Todd.
Todd, I'm Lidge. We have a podcast featuring talk about Bitcoin.
Oh, yeah. If you wanted to talk about Bitcoin, Scott Sears is my co-owner, and he's the gentleman who knows the most about it.
Okay, cool. That'd be great.
And there's 2 of us that know how to ring it up. We're training the rest of the staff eventually.
Cool. Hey, are you yourself invested in Bitcoin?
Not yet.
Not yet. I like the word yet.
Yeah.
It's a good answer, man.
Absolutely.
Well, you are. You're working here and you're accepting it, so that's an investment
Absolutely.
of sorts.
And we're excited because we've had multiple people come in that have been specifically coming in because of the Bitcoin. I actually had somebody talk to the valet and ask the valet to come in and ask the hostess specifically about that, and he didn't know what was going on because, we haven't thought to tell the valet about it, but the hostess said, oh yeah, absolutely, we definitely take Bitcoin, and I'm really glad to hear that they're coming in because of that.
So now, did they pay for the valet in Bitcoin as well?
I don't believe so.
All right, cool. Right on. Well, thanks.
My pleasure, no problem.
What were you saying about it?
It's the first time we're paying with Bitcoin at a local restaurant in Nashville. That's really cool.
So I'm looking at the wine menu here, where you have a price for the glass, then a price for the bottle. As John has been kind enough to offer to buy me a glass of wine on his Bitcoin dining out night, I'm looking at some of the lower prices here. And they do not list Bitcoin prices in the menu, which I can understand, as they probably would have to change the menu every single day if they did that.
Lidge, who'd have thought 20 years ago today we'd be sitting here drinking a bottle of Chateau de Chasselet wine, paying with bitcoins?
So, John, I wanted to ask you, we're sitting here, I figured we'd start recording a little bit of our chat about this and that.
Oh, yeah.
But we were just discussing looking up the price of Bitcoin now at the dinner table, and you went and saw that it was, what was it, about 7-something?
Yeah, 760, I think.
760, and then I pulled out my phone and looked on Crypto Ticker, and it said that Coinbase, I think, was 788, and that Mt. Gox is 930 or something. And I've noticed that Mt. Gox is always higher than Coinbase, and so I'm asking you, if you don't mind repeating it, tell me, what do you know about that? I mean, why is it that one has got a higher price than the other?
I believe it's simply because of the trading volume on Mt. Gox, so much higher than BTC or Crypto. So with that trading volume, basically the price goes up. Those people are driving the price up by buying that much more. That's my take on it. Whether or not that's true, I really don't know. I do know when Connie and I walked in, I said to the guy, by the way, we'll be paying with Bitcoin tonight. He said, what's Bitcoin? And then he kind of looked at me and kind of winked. I said, that was a good one. So, yeah, he knew exactly what I was talking about, and I appreciated his sense of humor.
Did they have a sign on the door on the way in?
I didn't see a sign on the door that mentioned that. I said, he asked me, what's it trading at? I said, I haven't even looked today.
And are you gonna try and tip the valet on your way out with Bitcoin?
I will not be tipping the valet. We parked across the street in the last available spot.
I did worse. I asked the valet where the parking was, and he allowed me to park in the valet parking myself.
Nice, man. Hey, so the guy at the front, the host, took out his phone to check the Bitcoin price and said Bitcoin's trading around 760, I think is what he said. I'm showing right now BTCE on my phone with my Bitcoin calculator. One Bitcoin's going for 778 and 58 cents. Switch over to Mt. Gox, that one Bitcoin's 924. So, okay, I'm going to pay for a meal here the first time here in Nashville.
But at what exchange rate? How does one determine between a consumer and the merchant what the exchange rate is?
Exactly. And of course, I would rather pay at the Mt. Gox 924 because that gives my buying power, $100 and some more than
you could probably get dessert.
Exactly. I could get an extra. I could pay for that glass of wine I'm going to buy you.
Oh yeah, the one that I'm drinking right now. You mean?
Exactly. So yeah, how do they? How do you haggle with the owners of the restaurant? Hey, you guys can't use that exchange rate. You can't use that. I don't know, man.
So maybe that's part of Bitcoin etiquette is to have that discussion on the way in the door.
On the way in the door, yes. What do you guys? Okay, well I'm going with Mt. Gox. You guys are going with BTCE. Let's split the difference.
Or maybe like gas stations, they'll have a guy outside with one of those long poles, and he'll be taking the letters down off the sign of what the Bitcoin exchange rate is for today,
I'm bringing the bill. The way Bitcoin works, we need to do the processing all at once. So all I need to ask is if you'd like me to put down a percentage or an amount, a tip, so that I can put that through the system at the same time.
That sounds good.
That's the only uncomfortable part about this so far that I can see.
Not uncomfortable at all. So let me ask a question. Yes. Unlike using a fiat currency, unlike paying in U.S. dollars, you can't add that tip on when you're doing a Bitcoin sale. It would have to go.
At this point, no.
It would have to be decided upon and added to.
That is correct.
I'm here to answer all your Bitcoin.
And you're Scott? Is that right?
Scott, yes, Scott Sears.
Are you guys the first ones to accept Bitcoin as a restaurant here in Nashville?
We're the first fine dining restaurant in the country to do so.
Wow, the first one in the country.
Nice. I mean, doing it at this level, there may be smaller sandwich shops or casual restaurants, but as far as fine dining goes, we're the first.
Well, I did hear that Subway was accepting it somewhere in Pennsylvania or something like that.
Subway and Flight are not competing, I'm happy to say. Because I'd be losing. Subway makes a pretty good sandwich for a lot of people.
So was this your idea to accept the Bitcoin here at Flight?
Actually, I was aware of Bitcoin, but, running a restaurant, you're kind of thinking about the restaurant business. And I work at Emma also, and that's a pretty big drain on my time. I mean, in a good way. Bill Butler here is a friend of mine, and we worked together with an internet company back in the 90s. And he brought it to my attention that he felt like it was going to be coming mainstream. And I trust Bill. We've worked together for a long time. And so when he takes it seriously, I thought, well, if there's no risk involved, I'm happy to be the first. And so we figured out a way for there to be no risk for the restaurant, and we implemented it in about a week.
So are you using BitPay now?
We are using Coinbase.
How did you decide to use Coinbase over BitPay or any other Bitcoin processing company?
Well, Bill brought me a couple of merchant tools, and Coinbase was the first one that we set up and got working to about 80% of where it needed to be. And while we were investigating BitPay, Coinbase came out with a solution that worked for us. And the only thing that would make me switch at this point would be a way to better manage the gratuity, because there isn't currently a way to let the customer privately provide a gratuity without having to inform the server beforehand, because all Bitcoin transactions at a merchant level like this are kind of a one-time thing, unreversible, all at once. So I don't know how you even work that out with a system like Bitcoin, but that's the only thing I would change for. Everything else seems to be working great with Coinbase. I'm just now realizing that I'm about to say this, but our credit card processing is down, but our Bitcoin is working.
Wow.
So at this very moment, I cannot accept credit cards. We're having to run them on the old-style gasoline station sliders with, carbon. And Bitcoin is working because the internet is working. I don't know why the internet processing went down, but other than that, I just think it brings in a different, new kind of customer, someone who's maybe a little more progressive and looking for a way to help advance that currency. And that's the type of people that we like serving at Flight.
Yeah, we were hearing that you guys were having people coming in specifically to use Bitcoin, which in fact we are tonight too.
It's happened with several guests from out of state, actually, who have been traveling here, and I guess y'all are looking for places to spend Bitcoin to evolve the currency, and that's worked several times for us.
And so how have you been able to publish that fact that an out-of-towner can come find you guys here in Nashville?
I have not yet. We are at a point now, I think after this week, where I've had enough servers run transactions and they're comfortable with it, where I can start promoting it within the city. Prior to that, I've been letting it grow amongst the more progressive Bitcoin users who are willing to be patient with any problems that we might have with the terminal or not understanding of what it is, because it is really new. The staff is still like, so where does the money go? Which I'm sure is what a lot of people want to ask. But
well, that's smart to have kind of a quiet launch.
It's a quiet launch, yes. But I think after this week with Restaurant Week, we've had several people pay with no problems. Tonight, credit cards aren't working, Bitcoins are working. So I feel like it's time to actually say, yeah, we can do this. And we'll put it on the website, and if there's an official sort of banner or tag, we'll put it on there. And we've used Twitter, and actually, when we released... when we did our public announcement of Bitcoin through a couple of articles and through Twitter and Facebook, that was our biggest social media campaign to date. It was a 0.5 on our engagement metrics. I don't know if anybody's out there who knows what that means, but 0.5 is actually a pretty darn good number.
I've been trying to learn what those numbers mean.
Yeah, well, for a long time I was like, how come I can't get this graph to move up? But it finally moved when we announced the Bitcoin thing. And I think Bitcoin would have been really successful that week had it not been the same week that China, announced they weren't really happy about it, and it went down from about 800 to 500. But since then, it's rebounded back to 800. So,
are you invested in Bitcoin yourself?
For the milliseconds that it takes for transactions to be converted from Bitcoin to US dollars, apparently I'm a Bitcoin owner. So not at the moment, but once you guys pay, I'll be a Bitcoin owner for a few milliseconds again.
I have to say that in my definition, just using Bitcoin as a business, as a merchant here, that's an investment in it, for sure. It may not be the kind of investment where you just hold on to it to wait to see if it grows in value, but I think it's definitely an investment, growing your business through it.
Okay, so my big question to you is, as I look at my phone here and I look at my Bitcoin calculator, I'm noticing that it looks like we have two different numbers here. When I go to one Bitcoin, according to Mt. Gox, currently is trading at $924.50. According to BTCE, one Bitcoin is currently trading at, as the little thing spins around, $778.50. Now, of course, I would rather go with the Mt. Gox number, and you'd probably rather go with the BTCE number, but you're going with the Coinbase number.
Whatever Coinbase says it is what it will be.
What's Coinbase saying now?
The servers wouldn't be able to tell you this because it doesn't actually put it on the top of the Coinbase app. I don't think. I'm looking at it now, and no, it doesn't list the conversion rate, but I happen to have an app running on mine.
So let me just say for our listeners, let me describe the scene here. We've got this beautiful table with nice black tablecloth, and then there are cell phones out, and everybody's double-handing cell phones. And
well, the reason
Scott's
here
got a
is that
phablet in one hand and an iPhone in the other as we close this deal.
Sadly, iOS does not have a Coinbase app. Apple removed it from the store for some reason, so we had to invest in an Android device that will make Android users very happy. I'm sure to hear that.
That's true. I think I have Crypto Ticker on here, which claims to have the Coinbase exchange rate, but it's not the Coinbase app.
Right, let me add to that I have on my iPhone, which I will probably one day replace with an Android. I have the blockchain app. I downloaded that app when they were offering it briefly, and then they took it off. So it's still on my iPhone, even though Apple does not offer it anymore.
And now I got to figure out how to use Android, which is the thing. $784 a Bitcoin. $783 and 18 cents.
Scott is holding up his phablet with a QR code on it, and it's facing John and lighting his face up beautifully. And John is going into his iPhone to get into his Bitcoin wallet.
Scan from QR code.
He's about to scan.
Scanning QR code. And let's double check. Just to be safe, I'm going to scan from QR code again, just to double check that everything went fine, although I know it did.
We actually don't have a Bitcoin wallet because it's all going into Coinbase's merchant system. So I don't actually get Bitcoin. It goes into their merchant system, and it's immediately converted. Yes,
okay,
exactly. So it's not going directly into a Bitcoin wallet. It's being converted by them and going right into my bank account tonight in U.S. dollars.
Now, what are they charging for that merchant service?
1%.
But that compares very favorably to credit cards.
If it was American Express, it'd be 2.5%. But since you can't use your American Express right now because the credit cards are down.
And so let me explain also for listeners that the reason why John and Scott are being so careful about making sure you scan it is because with Bitcoin you have to make sure that it's going to the right place because you can't get it back if you send it to the wrong place.
It's not about trust, it's about letting the math do the work. So I'm going to push send now. Here we go. Ready? Send payment. Signing inputs, this can take a few minutes, and it can. Once you saw me push send, my experience is that you don't have to worry anymore right now. But we'll see what happens here.
And it looks to me like, John, you're sending from blockchain to Coinbase.
That's right.
Yes. And we've had blockchain users before successfully do this.
And that's my blockchain wallet that's on my phone.
And all cell phones are facing me, and I'm blinded by science at the moment.
Yeah, that's the longest I've seen it take to actually do the inputs.
Sending transaction. There it goes. The done deal.
There it is.
There it goes.
Successful.
Completed.
That's great, so it gives you a confirmation.
Yeah. But
Nice.
if it hadn't, in order for me to minimize risk and really understand what's happening, we have connected it to send an email to our Twitter feed. So, I have a private Twitter connection there that shows that that happened, and also we're checking the email account, and I can see that the payment was received there. So 3 types of confirmation for the server to check to make sure they have the cash.
That's fascinating.
It's all set.
And this was Bill Butler who helped make sure this was all set up properly.
Music City Bitcoins is his merchant company.
Oh, nice. Nice job, Bill Butler. I got bad news, though, fellas. My blockchain wallet on my iPhone my balance is down to $11.14.
Oh, no.
No worries.
Did you just send me $1,000?
I might have.
Bill did that the first night. Instead of sending me $1, he sent me 1 Bitcoin.
He said, thanks, man.
And he said, can I have it back? And I said, maybe? Because it's not like cash. You can't exactly wrestle me for it in the parking lot, right?
Right.
I mean, it's irreversible.
And if you needed help figuring out how to get it back to him, you were going to have to ask Bill anyway, right?
Exactly.
Well, hey, that was
a pleasure meeting you guys.
Yeah, really a pleasure. Thanks so much, Scott. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for coming to the restaurant.
Yeah, it was great. Great experience, too.
Awesome. Thanks.
So, Lidge, when we found out that Flight was the first restaurant in Nashville to accept Bitcoins, I was pretty excited about it. And I have to admit, I was a little bit nervous because, I'm not one to go out to fancy restaurants and spend a lot of money.
Yeah, me neither. I'm more of a taco and occasional hamburgers and French fries kind of guy.
I have to say that overall, it really was a great evening. Connie and I each had the roast chicken and sweet potatoes. We had fancy beer. I had one. No, I had 2. She had 1. And Yeah, I had coffee and Bailey's for dessert. And then as planned, you showed up and joined us for a glass of wine and dessert at the end, which I paid for
That's
as
right.
well.
Thank you for that.
Thank you very much. I mean, you're welcome. And and then we were fortunate to get to speak with Scott Sears, one of the owners, who helped us check out and pay with Bitcoins.
That's right. That was very cool of him to come over to the table and talk to us like that and explain the whole process. It was just fascinating to watch as he had a phablet in one hand and an iPhone in the other, and your iPhone was out and my iPhone was out, just to record you guys, of course.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was surprised at how good he was at it, as if he'd been doing it for years. It seemed very natural to him. He seemed very comfortable with it.
He was a sharp guy, and he seemed to have a true understanding of the process and was able to guide us through it very smoothly.
Absolutely. So listen, all told, I spent a total of 0.192 Bitcoins that evening, which is the most Bitcoin I've ever spent. I don't even like saying that. Yeah, I know. And you know, I'm more of a hold on to the few Bitcoins I've got and hope they grow as an investment.
I'm certainly in that place too, having just bought some Bitcoins, although I'm looking forward to spending them and buying them and trying to keep them flowing through my wallet.
Oh, yeah. And I'm looking forward to them, you know, just going up in value. I can't say that I know for sure that's going to happen, but, you know, those are the projections for how it's going to go as more and more people come on board. So, you know, then when I got home, I did some math and I realized something important. I initially bought Bitcoins last year at around $200. I think it was last March, right as they were skyrocketing. I bought high instead of buying low, which you're not supposed to do.
Yeah, and I remember you telling me about them a year ago, and I wish I had listened to you then.
Yes, you should have listened to me, Lidge. Anyway, so yeah, I bought them in March right before they plummeted, which, by the way, as you remember, sent me into an angry stupor of sorts that lasted until sometime, I think, around my birthday last year, mid or late October.
Yeah, you sort of disappeared there for 6 or 7 months, right?
Yes, I disappeared into the dark...
The Bitcoin abyss.
The Bitcoin abyss, the dark recesses of my mind where I felt much guilt and remorse. But it's still, even in that period of time, I was still very pro-Bitcoin. I saw the light at the end of the tunnel, and
you saw the second coming.
I saw the second coming, and things actually turned out okay. So anyway, so after doing this basic math when I got home, I figured out that that fancy meal for 3 at Flight really only cost me about $33.
That's pretty good. $33 for 3 people to eat at a fine dining restaurant?
Exactly. So that made me feel better about it, you know, when I looked at what money I had actually put out. And then I thought, man, if I just waited to spend this 0.192 Bitcoins till this time next year, that meal for 3 would have only cost me $3.33.
Wow.
That's right. Well, that's, you know, assuming that this time next year, a Bitcoin will be worth $10,000, which it may.
It might. You never know.
Never know.
That's one heck of a happy meal.
That's right, man. We can keep our fingers crossed. So, Lidge, do you have any exciting news for us?
Why, yes, John, I do. Bitcoins and Gravy just won the Editor's Choice Award on the Let's Talk Bitcoin Network.
Hey, man, that's great. Give me a high five on that one.
Thank you, Adam B. Levine.
And thank you for your votes.
It really means a great deal to us, and it is incredibly inspiring to have this kind of support. So thank you to all of you. Hey, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Jimmy Song. Thanks very much for joining us today and listening. We greatly appreciate your time and attention.
If you've enjoyed the show, please go over to iTunes
and leave us a review, whether it's 3 stars or 5 stars. It really helps.
I'm John Barrett.
And I'm Lidge Shaw, and you've been listening to
Bitcoins and Gravy from East Nashville, Tennessee.
I'm Ed.
I'm Ethan. And together we host Ed and Ethan's Bitcoin Report live Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern on KCAA Radio 1050 a.m.
It's a show all about the world's leading cryptocurrency, Bitcoin.
Not everybody we talk to agrees with us.
Like Peter Schiff.
Bitcoins are not money. They're not better than gold. It's not gold 2.0.
But we get some great perspectives from people like Eric Voorhees.
Nothing has intrinsic value. Things are valued subjectively by the people doing the valuing.
Sometimes it gets controversial.
Like when we talk to Charlie Shrem.
Why can't a government stop it, or why can't a government come in? The same reason that the government has tried to shut down file sharing.
And good times with friends and allies like Roger Ver.
It's always great to talk about Bitcoin with anyone willing to listen. And thank you guys for your wonderful coverage. I listen from time to time myself.
Oh my goodness, awesome. I've just become Twitter pet Roger. You have given me a case of the vapors, good sir. So tune in live Wednesday nights and give us a call, or download direct from edandethan.com.